The crack of a palm striking flesh echoed through Willow Creek's dusty Main Street, silencing the usual afternoon bustle of 1878 Wyoming territory. Hannah Porter's cheek stung from her father's blow, but it was the public humiliation that brought tears to her eyes as townsfolk stopped to stare. "You ungrateful child," Gerald Porter's voice boomed, his face reddened with fury. "I arrange a proper marriage with Judge Collins, and you have the audacity to refuse." Hannah clutched her cheek, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. At 22, she had endured her father's controlling nature since her mother's death 10 years prior, but never had he struck her in public. "I won't marry a man 3 times my age, father," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I don't care about his money or position." Gerald raised his hand again, and Hannah flinched, preparing for another blow, but it never came. "She's with me." The deep, steady voice cut through the tension like a knife. Hannah turned to see a tall stranger stepping off the boardwalk, his boots kicking up dust as he approached. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the firm set of his jaw and the intensity in his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" Gerald demanded, his hand still suspended in midair. The stranger moved between them, and Hannah caught her first full glimpse of his face weathered by sun and wind, but handsome, with kind blue eyes that belied the hardness of his stance. "The name's Jackson Everett," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent street. "And I believe the lady's made her choice clear," Gerald scoffed. "This is family business, Cowboy. My daughter has agreed to accompany me to dinner tonight," Jackson finished smoothly, turning slightly to catch Hannah's eye with a look that silently asked for her trust. Hannah, seeing an escape from both her father's rage and the horrific prospect of marriage to the 65-year-old judge, nodded quickly. "Yes, that's right. I was just explaining to father that I had prior commitments." Gerald's face contorted with rage. "You dare lie to my face?" "You've never mentioned this drifter before." Jackson's posture shifted subtly, and Hannah noticed for the first time the holstered revolver at his hip. He didn't touch it or make any threatening move, but its presence seemed to register with her father as well. "Mr. Porter," Jackson said calmly, "I suggest you take some time to cool your temper. The lady and I have plans, and I won't stand by while you mistreat her." A small crowd had gathered now, including Sheriff Thomas, who approached with measured steps. "Everything all right here?" Before Gerald could answer, Jackson spoke. "Just a misunderstanding, Sheriff. Mr. Porter here was just leaving, weren't you, sir?" Gerald looked around at the assembled faces, many showing disapproval at his public display of violence toward his daughter. His business as the town's only banker relied on respect and goodwill. Scowling, he straightened his vest. "This isn't over, Hannah," he hissed, then turned to Jackson. "And you, sir, will regret interfering." With that, he stalked off toward the bank at the end of the street. The crowd began to disperse, and Hannah found herself standing alone with the stranger who had come to her rescue. Up close, she realized he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps no more than 28 or 29. "Thank you," she said quietly, still holding her bruised cheek. Jackson removed his hat, revealing thick, sandy brown hair. No man should ever strike a woman like that, especially not in public. He hesitated, then added with a hint of embarrassment, "I apologize for my presumption about dinner. I thought it might help diffuse the situation." Hannah glanced nervously in the direction her father had gone. It was quick thinking. "I'm grateful. Miss Porter, I meant what I said to your father. I'd be honored if you would join me for dinner." His expression was earnest, his invitation genuine. "Unless you have actual prior commitments." Hannah couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her lips. "No, Mr. Everett, I'm quite free this evening, though I should warn you accepting your invitation might make you the target of my father's considerable influence in this town." Jackson smiled, and the warmth of it reached his eyes. "I'm just passing through. I doubt your father's influence extends beyond Willow Creek." Hannah considered him carefully. Everything she'd been taught warned against trusting strangers, especially handsome cowboys with mysterious pasts. but something in his eyes made her believe he meant her no harm. 6 o'clock at the Willow Creek Hotel dining room, she suggested. Jackson replaced his hat with a nod. I'll be there, Miss Porter. As Hannah watched him walk away, she wondered what she had just agreed to. But whatever complications might come from her impulsive decision, they seemed preferable to the life her father had planned for her. Hannah hurried home through the back streets, hoping to avoid further confrontation with her father. Their house, the largest in Willow Creek, stood as a testament to Gerald Porter's success as a banker. To Hannah, it felt more like a prison than a home. Inside, she slipped up to her bedroom and locked the door, her heart racing. The face in her mirror looked back with a swollen cheek and frightened eyes, but also a spark of defiance that had been missing for years. She pressed a cool cloth to her face and began selecting a dress for dinner, wondering about the mysterious Jackson Everett. His intervention had been both chivalrous and dangerous. Her father was not a man who forgave easily. At 5:30, Hannah quietly descended the stairs, having heard her father leave an hour earlier. Their housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds, intercepted her in the foyer. Your father came home in quite a state, Miss Hannah. Said you're to stay in your room until he returns from his meeting with Judge Collins. Hannah straightened her shoulders. I have an engagement this evening, Mrs. Reynolds. Please tell father I'll return later. The older woman looked troubled. He was very insistent, miss. Perhaps you should reconsider. I've reconsidered enough in my life, Hannah replied firmly. Good evening. Outside, the spring air carried the scent of wildflowers from the distant hills. Hannah walked briskly toward the hotel, her mind racing. What was she doing? Meeting a stranger for dinner, defying her father openly, it was madness, yet she felt more alive than she had in years. The Willow Creek Hotel was the town's finest establishment, boasting actual glass windows and imported furniture. Hannah entered the dining room at precisely 6 o'clock to find Jackson already seated at a table near the window. He stood immediately upon seeing her, his expression darkening briefly at the sight of her bruised cheek. Miss Porter, he said, pulling out her chair. You look lovely. Hannah settled into her seat, acutely aware of the curious glances from other diners. Thank you for your kindness today, Mr. Everett, though I fear you've involved yourself in a complicated situation. Jackson sat across from her. I've never been one to walk away from a person in need. His eyes met hers with sincerity. May I ask why your father was so determined to see you married to this judge? Hannah sighed. Judge Collins is wealthy and influential. Father believes the connection would benefit his banking business. And she hesitated. He's impatient to see me settled. My mother died when I was 12 and I've been managing our household since then. Father thinks it's time I managed someone else's. And what do you think? Jackson asked, his attention fully focused on her. The question startled Hannah. No one had asked her opinion on the matter before. I think marriage should be based on mutual respect and affection, not business arrangements. A small smile played at Jackson's lips. A romantic notion. Perhaps, Hannah admitted, but I've seen too many loveless marriages in this town. I'd rather remain unmarried than face such a fate. Their conversation was interrupted by the waiter bringing their meals. As they ate, Hannah learned that Jackson was a former cavalry scout turned ranch hand, traveling north to Montana for work. What brought you to Willow Creek? She asked. It's hardly on the main trail to Montana. Jackson hesitated before answering. I heard there might be work at the Henderson Ranch outside town. Thought I'd inquire before continuing north. Hannah sensed there was more to his story, but didn't press. They had both ordered apple pie for dessert when the dining room door burst open and Gerald Porter stormed in, followed closely by Judge Collins. There she is, Gerald announced loudly, with the drifter who accosted me in the street. The judge, a corpulent man with a white beard and cold eyes, surveyed Hannah with a proprietary gaze that made her skin crawl. Jackson stood slowly. Mr. Porter, this is hardly the place. You shut your mouth, Gerald snarled. Hannah, come home immediately. The judge and I have finalized the details of your marriage. The ceremony will take place next Sunday. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. No, Father, I've told you repeatedly I will not marry Judge Collins. The judge stepped forward, his voice oily. Now, my dear, your father has your best interests at heart. A young woman needs guidance and protection. She has protection, Jackson said quietly, moving to stand beside Hannah's chair. Gerald's face reddened. Sheriff. He called, and Hannah was horrified to see Sheriff Thomas enter the dining room. This man interfered with my parental authority and is now threatening us. Arrest him. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Mr. Porter, I didn't hear any threat. Are you refusing to do your duty? Gerald demanded. This vagrant has no business in our town, corrupting my daughter. Hannah stood, her voice stronger than she felt. Mr. Everett has been a perfect gentleman, which is more than I can say for you, father, or your choice of husband for me. Judge Collins frowned deeply. Gerald, your daughter lacks proper respect. Perhaps some time confined to her room before the wedding would improve her disposition. Jackson's hand moved slightly toward his holster, drawing the sheriff's attention. Easy now, Sheriff Thomas warned. Nobody needs to get hurt here. Hannah made a swift decision. Mr. Everett was just telling me about his plans to leave for Montana tomorrow. I've decided to accompany him. A shocked silence fell over the room. Gerald recovered first, his voice dangerously low. You will do no such thing. I'm 22 years old, father. You cannot force me to marry against my will, nor can you keep me prisoner in your house. Jackson looked at her with surprise but quickly masked it. My offer stands, Miss Porter, if you're certain. Hannah met his gaze steadily. I am. Gerald lunged forward, grabbing Hannah's arm roughly. This is absurd. I'll see you locked in your room until you come to your senses. Jackson moved with surprising speed, breaking Gerald's grip on Hannah's arm. Don't touch her again. The sheriff stepped between them. That's enough. Mr. Porter, your daughter is of legal age. You can't force her to do anything. Gerald turned to the lawman in disbelief. You're taking their side. I'm not taking sides, Sheriff Thomas replied firmly, but I won't allow any more public disturbances. Now I suggest everyone calm down and go their separate ways. Judge Collins placed a restraining hand on Gerald's shoulder. Come, Gerald, perhaps your daughter needs time to consider her options more carefully. He looked at Hannah with cold calculation. I'm a patient man. My offer will remain open, for now. As they left, Gerald turned back with one last venomous glare. You've made your choice, Hannah. Don't expect anything from me ever again. When they were gone, Hannah sank back into her chair, trembling. The remaining diners quickly resumed their meals, though the buzz of whispered conversation filled the room. Jackson sat down across from her. Did you mean what you said about coming with me to Montana? Hannah looked up, suddenly realizing the magnitude of her impulsive declaration. I don't know, I spoke without thinking. It would be a hard journey, he said honestly, and you barely know me. Hannah touched her bruised cheek gently. I know you showed me kindness when others merely watched, but you're right, it was a rash statement. Jackson studied her for a moment. I leave tomorrow at dawn. If you truly wish to come, meet me at the livery stable. But think carefully, Miss Porter. The life you know may be difficult, but at least it's familiar. The unknown can be far harsher. Hannah nodded, understanding the gravity of the choice before her. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Everett. They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, and Jackson insisted on escorting her home despite her protests. They stopped a block from her house. Whatever you decide, he said softly, I wish you happiness, Miss Porter. Hannah watched him walk away, torn between fear of the unknown and dread of returning to her father's house. As she slipped quietly into her bedroom, she began to pack a small bag, still unsure if she would find the courage to use it. Morning came with the soft glow of dawn spreading across the eastern sky. Hannah had barely slept, weighing her options throughout the night. The small bag she'd packed sat accusingly by her door. Leaving meant abandoning everything she knew: her home, her few friends, her position in society. Staying meant submitting to her father's will, and a loveless marriage to a man who viewed her as property. With trembling hands, she dressed in her most practical skirt and blouse, adding a warm shawl against the morning chill. She placed a brief note on her bed, took her small savings from its hiding place, and picked up her bag. The streets were quiet as Hannah made her way to the livery stable, her heart pounding with each step. When she rounded the corner, she saw Jackson already saddling a chestnut gelding. He looked up, surprise and something like admiration crossing his face when he saw her. "You came." Hannah set down her bag, suddenly uncertain. "I'm not sure this is wise." Jackson approached her slowly. "It probably isn't. You'd be traveling with a man you barely know to a place you've never seen." "When you put it that way, it sounds like madness," Hannah said with a nervous laugh. "Complete madness," he agreed, but there was warmth in his smile. "But sometimes the maddest choices are the only ones that lead to freedom." Hannah took a deep breath. "Do you have room for a madwoman on your journey, Mr. Everett?" "I believe I do, Miss Porter." He gestured to a second horse, a dappled mare. "I took the liberty of arranging transportation for you, just in case." Hannah raised an eyebrow. "You were that confident I would come." "Not confident," Jackson admitted. "Hopeful, perhaps." Their departure from Willow Creek was quiet and swift. Jackson explained they would follow the trail north for several days before reaching the ranch where he hoped to find work. As the town disappeared behind them, Hannah felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. By midday, they stopped near a stream to rest the horses and eat the provisions Jackson had packed. Hannah's muscles ached from hours in the saddle, but she was determined not to complain. "May I ask you something, Mr. Everett?" she said as they sat on fallen logs eating jerky and hardtack. "Jackson, please, and yes, you may." "Why did you really come to Willow Creek? I sense there's more to your story." Jackson was quiet for a long moment. "You're perceptive," he sighed, looking toward the distant mountains. "I was tracking someone, a man named Raymond Caldwell." Hannah's eyes widened. "The outlaw, the one who robbed the Cheyenne Bank last year," Jackson nodded grimly. "The same. He killed my brother during that robbery. James was a teller there." "I'm so sorry," Hannah said softly. "I've been following his trail for months. Information led me to believe he might pass through Willow Creek, but I was wrong. The trail's gone cold." Hannah processed this information carefully. "So you're not actually heading to Montana for ranch work?" "I am now," Jackson said with a slight smile. "I can't chase ghosts forever. At some point, a man needs to move forward with his life." They continued their journey through the afternoon, camping that night in a small grove of cottonwoods. Hannah, exhausted from the day's ride, fell asleep quickly despite the hard ground beneath her blanket. She awoke to the smell of coffee and found Jackson already up, tending a small fire. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well?" Hannah stretched, feeling muscles she didn't know she had. "Well enough, considering I've never slept on the ground before." Jackson handed her a tin cup of coffee. "The first night's the hardest. It gets easier." As they continued their journey over the next several days, Hannah found he was right. Each night she slept more soundly, and each day her body adjusted better to the rigors of travel. They fell into an easy routine, sharing stories and observations as they rode. Hannah learned that Jackson had grown up on a small farm in Ohio before heading west with his brother after the war. He was well-read despite limited formal education, and his quiet humor often surprised her into laughter. In turn, she told him about her mother's death and the loneliness of growing up under her father's strict control. She spoke of her dreams to one day become a teacher, dreams her father had dismissed as frivolous. On the fourth day, storm clouds gathered ominously on the horizon. "We need to find better shelter than canvas tonight," Jackson said, studying the sky with concern. "There's a way station about 5 miles ahead. We should be able to reach it before the storm hits." They urged their horses to a faster pace, but the storm moved quickly. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets when they were still a mile from shelter. By the time they reached the way station, little more than a sturdy cabin maintained for travelers, they were both drenched. Inside, they found the station deserted but well stocked with firewood and basic provisions. Jackson quickly built a fire while Hannah wrung water from her hair and clothing. "You should change into something dry," Jackson suggested, politely turning his back to give her privacy. "I'll see what supplies are available." Hannah changed into her spare clothes behind a rough partition, grateful for the warmth of the fire. Outside, thunder crashed and lightning illuminated the cabin in brief, brilliant flashes. Jackson prepared a simple meal of beans and bacon from the station's provisions, leaving payment in the strongbox as was customary. They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. "Do you regret coming with me?" Jackson asked suddenly, his eyes reflecting the dancing firelight. Hannah considered the question seriously. "No," she finally answered. "Despite the discomfort and uncertainty, I feel free. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making my own choices." Jackson nodded in understanding. "Freedom comes with responsibility and consequences." "Are you warning me again, Mr. Everett?" Hannah asked with a small smile. "Jackson," he reminded her, "and no, not warning, just acknowledging reality." The storm continued through the night, forcing them to remain at the way station the following day as flooded creeks made travel dangerous. Hannah found she didn't mind the delay. There was something comforting about the small cabin with its crackling fire and the rhythmic sound of rain on the roof. As they shared another simple meal that evening, Hannah noticed Jackson watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking," he replied slowly, "about how differently things might have gone if I hadn't been in Willow Creek that day." Hannah set down her tin plate. "Why were you there? In that exact spot at that exact moment?" Jackson's expression softened. "I just learned my information about Caldwell was wrong. I was disappointed, angry even. I went for a walk to clear my head, and that's when I saw your father strike you." He paused. "Something just snapped inside me. I couldn't stand by and watch." "So we both changed each other's paths that day," Hannah observed quietly. Their eyes met across the small table, and Hannah felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of the connection that had been growing since that first moment in Willow Creek's dusty street. Jackson stood abruptly. "We should get some rest. The creek should be passable by morning." Hannah nodded, trying to hide her disappointment at the moment's end. She settled onto her bedroll near the fire, listening to Jackson moving about the cabin, securing things for the night. "Good night, Jackson," she said softly. There was a pause before he replied, his voice equally soft. "Good night, Hannah." The storm passed during the night, leaving a washed, clean world of brilliant blue skies and sparkling droplets on every surface. They set out early, making good time on the now muddy trail. By late afternoon of their 6th day of travel, Jackson pointed to a sprawling ranch nestled in a verdant valley. "The Henderson place," he explained. "One of the largest cattle operations in the territory." Hannah felt a sudden anxiety. What would happen now? Would Jackson still want her company once he secured employment? And what place could she possibly have on a cattle ranch? They were greeted at the main house by Howard Henderson himself, a barrel-chested man with a booming voice and friendly manner. "Jackson Everett," he exclaimed. "Randall said you might be coming our way, and who's this lovely lady?" Jackson hesitated, glancing at Hannah. "This is Miss Hannah Porter, my traveling companion." Henderson's bushy eyebrows rose slightly, but his welcoming smile didn't falter. "Miss Porter, welcome to the Double H. You folks must be tired from your journey. Martha," he called to his wife, who appeared in the doorway, "we have guests for supper." That evening, after a hearty meal, Henderson offered Jackson the foreman position he'd been hoping for. "Randall vouched for your skills, and that's good enough for me. Previous foreman left for California 2 weeks ago. Need someone who knows cattle and can handle men." Jackson accepted gratefully, then broached the subject of Hannah. "Miss Porter requires accommodations as well. She's experienced in household management." Martha Henderson brightened. "Oh, we could certainly use help with the house and the children. Would you be interested, Miss Porter?" Hannah, relieved and grateful, accepted immediately. "I would be honored, Mrs. Henderson." Later, as they walked toward the bunkhouse where Jackson would stay, he explained his arrangement with Hannah. "I've secured you a room in the main house. Mrs. Henderson seems pleased to have your assistance." "Thank you," Hannah said, genuinely moved by his consideration, "for everything." Jackson stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. "I want you to know something, Hannah. I didn't bring you here out of pity or obligation. These past days traveling with you have been—" He searched for the right word, unexpected, in the best possible way. Hannah felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "For me as well." He took her hand gently. "I don't know what the future holds, but I hope you'll consider staying, not just for the position with the Hendersons, but—" He paused, suddenly uncertain. "But," Hannah prompted softly. "But for the possibility of us," he finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "I find myself thinking about you in ways I never anticipated." Hannah's heart raced as she realized her own feelings mirrored his. "I would like to stay," she said, "for all those reasons." Jackson's smile in the moonlight was worth every mile of their difficult journey. He raised her hand to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply moving. "Good night, Hannah Porter," he said. "I'll see you in the morning." The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to Hannah's life. She quickly proved her value to the Henderson household, managing domestic affairs efficiently and becoming a favorite of the Henderson children. Jackson thrived in his role as foreman, earning the respect of the ranch hands through his fair treatment and hard work. They found moments to be together despite their busy schedules, Sunday afternoon rides, shared meals, and quiet conversations on the porch after the household had retired for the night. With each passing day, their connection deepened. 3 months after their arrival, Hannah received a letter forwarded from Willow Creek. It was from Mrs. Reynolds, her father's housekeeper, informing her that Gerald Porter had suffered a minor stroke. He was recovering but had been asking for his daughter. Hannah showed the letter to Jackson that evening as they sat on the porch swing. "I should go to him," she said, though the thought of returning to Willow Creek filled her with dread. Jackson took her hand. "Would you like me to accompany you?" His offer touched her deeply. "You would do that?" "Hannah," he said seriously, "I would cross mountains for you. A journey back to Willow Creek is nothing in comparison." The depth of feeling in his voice made her breath catch. Over the past months, their affection had grown steadily, expressed in small gestures and meaningful glances, but neither had put their feelings into words. "Jackson," she began hesitantly, "before we go, I need to know, what are we to each other?" He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you properly." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I love you, Hannah Porter. I think I began falling in love with you the moment you stood up to your father in that dining room, showing more courage than most men I've known." Joy bloomed in Hannah's chest, bright and overwhelming. "I love you too," she whispered. "I never thought I could feel this way so completely myself, yet so connected to another person." Jackson leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a tender first kiss that held the promise of countless more to come. When they parted, his smile was radiant in the gathering dusk. "Marry me," he said simply. "Be my partner in all things." Hannah laughed, tears of happiness spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their return to Willow Creek a week later caused quite a stir. Hannah, now wearing Jackson's mother's ring on her finger, walked confidently beside her fiancé through the town that had once felt like a prison. Gerald Porter had indeed recovered somewhat from his stroke, though he remained weak and used a cane. His reception of Hannah was stilted at first, pride and anger still evident in his demeanor. But when she introduced Jackson as her fiancé, explaining how he had built a respected position at the Henderson Ranch, Gerald's attitude slowly began to shift. "You look well," he admitted grudgingly to Hannah over dinner at their old home. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am happy, father," she confirmed. "I've found my place in the world and a man who respects me as an equal." Gerald glanced at Jackson, who met his gaze steadily. "And you, Mr. Everett, what are your intentions toward my daughter?" "To love and honor her for the rest of my days," Jackson replied without hesitation. "To build a life together based on mutual respect and affection." Gerald was silent for a long moment. "I may have been overly harsh in my treatment of Hannah," he finally said, the closest thing to an apology his pride would allow. "A father wishes to see his daughter well situated in life." "I understand that, sir," Jackson said. "And I can promise you that Hannah will want for nothing in my care, though I suspect she would do quite well even without me." Hannah reached across the table to touch her father's hand. "I would like for us to be reconciled, father. Life is too short for continued estrangement." The old banker's eyes softened slightly. "Perhaps you're right," he cleared his throat. "You would both be welcome to visit again, from time to time." It wasn't a wholehearted blessing, but it was a beginning. They were married 2 weeks later in the Henderson Ranch's garden, surrounded by wildflowers and well-wishers. Martha Henderson had helped Hannah fashion a beautiful gown, and Howard stood as Jackson's best man. Even Gerald Porter made the journey from Willow Creek for the occasion, watching with grudging approval as his daughter began her new life. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Jackson held Hannah close. "Did you ever imagine, that day in Willow Creek, that we would end up here?" he asked. Hannah shook her head, smiling up at him. "Never, but I'm grateful every day for your courage in stepping forward." "She's with me," Jackson repeated his words from that fateful day, his voice filled with love and pride. "The truest words I've ever spoken." 2 years later, Hannah stood on the porch of their own small ranch house, watching Jackson ride in from checking the herd. Their land, a wedding gift from the Hendersons, who had come to think of them as family, wasn't large, but it was theirs, built with hard work and determination. As Jackson dismounted, their 1-year-old daughter, Emma, toddled toward him on unsteady legs from where she had been playing under Hannah's watchful eye. Jackson scooped her up with a laugh, planting kisses on her chubby cheeks before coming to greet his wife. "How are my girls today?" he asked, putting his free arm around Hannah's expanding waistline. Their second child was due in just 3 months. "We're perfect," Hannah replied, leaning into his embrace. "Especially now that you're home." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened young woman facing an unwanted marriage to a confident wife, mother, and partner, all because a brave cowboy had stepped forward in a dusty street and changed the course of her life with 5 simple words. "She's with me, and she always would be."